My coworkers sabotaged my promotion by lying to our boss about my attitude problem. This week, karma made sure they all got to meet the new manager, me. For 3 years, I'd been the invisible backbone of our department. While Veronica spent hours perfecting her nail art at her desk, I reorganized our entire filing system. While Dennis took 3-hour liquid lunches, I stayed late debugging code. And while Priya gossiped by the coffee machine about everyone's personal lives, I landed our biggest client. They thought I didn't notice when they started their whisper campaign. It began subtly. Veronica would stop talking when I entered the break room. Dennis started CCing our boss on emails questioning my decisions. Priya began documenting my arrival times, conveniently ignoring that I worked through lunch daily while she took 2-hour shopping breaks. The promotion to department manager was supposed to be mine. My metrics were flawless. Customer satisfaction, 98%. Project completion rate, 100%. But numbers don't matter when 3 people coordinate their lies. During my review, our boss Miranda looked uncomfortable. "Your work is exceptional," she said, avoiding eye contact. "But multiple team members have raised concerns about your collaborative spirit." I knew exactly who those team members were. They say you're difficult to work with, dismissive, even hostile. Every word was a knife. I'd covered for these people countless times. When Veronica missed deadlines because of her hangovers, I'd quietly finished her reports. When Dennis lost a major account through incompetence, I'd worked weekends to win it back. When Priya accidentally deleted our client database, I'd spent 72 straight hours recovering it. The promotion went to Veronica. She celebrated with a department lunch I wasn't invited to. From my desk, I watched them toast with champagne Dennis had expensed as client entertainment. That afternoon, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of Veronica's social media posts during work hours. Security footage of Dennis stumbling back from lunch. Priya's actual timesheet versus her reported hours. Their personal shopping delivered to the office. The dating app notifications constantly pinging Dennis's screen during presentations. But my masterpiece was the email archive. 3 months of messages between them, planning my downfall, deciding what lies to tell. Veronica writing, "If we all say the same thing, Miranda has to believe us." Dennis responding, "She's too competent, makes us look bad." Priya adding, "Once I'm assistant manager, I'll make sure she quits." They'd forgotten our emails auto backup to the cloud, and that I'd set up that system. 2 weeks into Veronica's management disaster, corporate arrived for a surprise audit. Our department's performance had plummeted 47% in 14 days. Clients were demanding explanations. Projects were hemorrhaging money. The auditor pulled me aside. "You're Josephine?" she asked, reviewing her tablet. I nodded. "Your name is on every successful project for the past 3 years. But you weren't promoted?" "Personality conflicts," I said simply. She frowned and scheduled individual interviews with the entire team. Veronica crumbled immediately, admitting she'd been overwhelmed and had no idea how I'd managed everything. Dennis, still buzzed from lunch, slurred through his excuses. Priya tried to blame me for not helping during the transition, until the auditor showed her the emails I'd sent offering assistance. All ignored. That night, Miranda was terminated for gross negligence in personnel management. The next morning, corporate called me directly. "We need someone to salvage this department immediately. The position is yours if you want it." "I'll need full autonomy over personnel decisions," I said. Granted. I spent the weekend preparing, new policies typed, termination paperwork drafted, security badges deactivated. Monday morning, I arrived early and placed 3 boxes on 3 desks. Veronica walked in first, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, then horror. "Morning," I said pleasantly. "There's been a restructuring." And Dennis appeared next, saw me at Miranda's former desk, and actually stumbled backward. Priya was last, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I stood, smoothing my new blazer. "As your new department head, I'll need to evaluate all positions for redundancy. But first," I smiled, checking my watch. "HR needs to see you 3 immediately. Something about falsifying timesheet records and misuse of company resources." Priya's face went white. "You reported us?" "I didn't have to," I replied. "Your own emails and security footage spoke volumes." Corporate was particularly interested in that champagne lunch. As security escorted them out, boxes in hand, I pulled up our client list. Time to rebuild what they'd destroyed. But the silence felt wrong, too complete. I walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot. My 3 former coworkers stood by Veronica's car, but they weren't leaving. They were on their phones, gesturing wildly, looking back up at my window. Then I saw him, walking across the parking lot in an expensive suit I recognized. My ex-husband, the corporate lawyer, the one who'd tried to destroy me once before. 5 years of marriage to Bradley had taught me exactly how his mind worked. He approached every situation like a chess game, always thinking 3 moves ahead. Seeing him stride confidently toward my former coworkers, briefcase in hand, made my stomach clench with familiar dread. I'd been 23 when we met at a corporate networking event, fresh out of college, overwhelmed by the sea of power suits and practiced handshakes. Bradley had rescued me from an awkward conversation with his charming smile and seemingly genuine interest in my ideas. He was 31, already a senior associate at Kellerman & Associates, and I was flattered that someone so accomplished wanted to spend time with me. Our courtship felt like a fairy tale. Expensive dinners, weekend trips to wine country, tickets to shows I could never afford. He introduced me to his colleagues as brilliant and going places. When he proposed after 18 months, I thought I'd won the lottery. The cracks didn't show until after the wedding. It started with small corrections. "You might want to rephrase that in your presentation. Maybe choose a different outfit for the client dinner. I'm just trying to help you succeed, sweetheart." By year 2, he was editing my emails before I sent them, scheduling my networking events, and steering my career decisions. When I got the job at Morrison Tech, the company I now managed, he'd insisted on reviewing my contract first. "These corporations will take advantage of someone inexperienced," he'd said, marking up the agreement with his red pen. "Good thing you have me to protect you." I'd been grateful then, naive enough to mistake control for care. The divorce had been nuclear warfare. Bradley knew every weakness in my financial situation because he'd managed our money. He knew my insecurities because I'd shared them during intimate moments. He knew my professional relationships because he'd cultivated them alongside me. When I finally found the courage to leave, he'd tried to destroy everything I'd built. He'd called my boss, suggesting I was emotionally unstable and going through a difficult time. He'd contacted clients, hinting that my personal problems might affect my work quality. He'd even reached out to my colleagues, expressing concern about my mental state. The divorce settlement had favored him heavily. As a lawyer, he'd known how to present the case to make me look unreasonable. I'd walked away with almost nothing except my job, which he'd nearly cost me too. Now, watching him shake hands with Veronica outside, I realized he'd found new pieces to move on his board. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. There's a lot you don't know about your situation. Bradley." I stared at the screen. The arrogance was breathtaking. After everything he'd put me through, he thought he could just summon me for a conversation. Another message. "I'm representing your former colleagues. They have grounds for wrongful termination. We should discuss this civilly before things get complicated." The audacity made me laugh out loud. Bradley had always believed he was the smartest person in any room. He'd underestimated me during the divorce, and he was underestimating me now. I opened my laptop and began typing. "Mr. Kellerman, any communication regarding personnel matters should be directed to our corporate legal department. I'm forwarding your contact information to them now. Best regards, Josephine Chen, Department Manager." I hit send, then immediately called our general counsel. "Amelia, it's Josephine. I need to brief you on a potential legal situation." While I explained the circumstances to Amelia, I watched Bradley's group through the window. Veronica was gesticulating wildly, probably recounting her version of events. Dennis kept nodding and pointing at our building. Priya stood apart, arms crossed, looking skeptical. Smart girl, Priya. She knew they'd screwed up. Amelia listened without interrupting, then asked, "Do you have documentation of their misconduct?" 17 gigabytes worth, I said. "Email archives, security footage, timesheet discrepancies, expense report fraud, and recorded conversations." Recorded conversations? Miranda held performance reviews in her office. She always recorded them for her notes. "I have access to the system." There was a pause. "Josephine, that's comprehensive." "I learned from the best," I said, thinking of Bradley's meticulous approach to gathering evidence. "Sometimes being married to a lawyer teaches you things. Your ex-husband is representing them? Apparently. That creates an interesting conflict of interest. He has intimate knowledge of your personal and professional background from your marriage. Any competent judge would consider that problematic." Relief flooded through me. "So they don't have a case?" "Not based on what you've told me. Wrongful termination requires proof that they were fired for illegal reasons. Discrimination, retaliation for whistleblowing, that sort of thing. Poor performance and misconduct are perfectly valid grounds for termination. What should I expect? Posturing, mostly. They'll probably demand reinstatement, back pay, and damages for emotional distress. We'll respond with our evidence and counter with our own claims for the losses their misconduct caused the company." After I hung up, I felt calmer. Bradley was playing his usual intimidation game, but this time I had the stronger position. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. "Josephine." Bradley's voice was as smooth as ever. "I was hoping we could handle this professionally." "We are handling it professionally, through proper legal channels. There's no need for lawyers to get involved. We're both reasonable people." The irony wasn't lost on me. "You're a lawyer, Bradley. You're literally involved. You know what I mean. We could resolve this quietly. Your former colleagues are willing to waive their rights to pursue damages if you provide positive references and agree not to contest their unemployment claims." "That's generous of them," I said dryly, "considering they committed fraud and conspired to damage my career. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" I smiled. 17 gigabytes of it. The line went quiet. Bradley was recalculating. "Perhaps we should meet in person," he said finally. "Neutral ground. There are things about this situation you might not understand, such as Veronica's promotion wasn't just about performance metrics. There were other factors. Political considerations. Relationships with key stakeholders." My blood chilled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that sometimes the best candidate doesn't get the job for reasons that have nothing to do with qualifications. And sometimes when those reasons come to light, they create liability for the company." He was fishing, trying to make me think there was some hidden corruption in my situation. Classic Bradley. When you don't have facts, create doubt. "If you have evidence of wrongdoing, present it to the appropriate authorities," I said. "Otherwise, this conversation is over." "Josephine, wait." I hung up, but his words had planted a seed of uncertainty. What if there was something I didn't know? What if Miranda's promotion decision had been influenced by factors beyond the lies my coworkers told? I pulled up Miranda's personnel file and began reading. Her hiring date, performance reviews, salary history. Nothing unusual jumped out. Then I checked her expense reports for the months leading up to my review. 3 dinners with Harrison Caldwell, Morrison Tech's VP of Business Development. 2 lunches with his assistant. A weekend conference in Napa that Caldwell had also attended. Harrison Caldwell? The man who'd interviewed me when I was first hired, who'd praised my work on the Branson account, who'd been noticeably absent from the office the week of my promotion review. I pulled his travel records. He'd been in Chicago that week, supposedly meeting with potential clients, but his expense reports showed dinners for one, and charges at a hotel spa. My desk phone rang. Internal call. "Josephine, it's Amelia. Can you come to my office? We need to discuss your situation." The general counsel's office was on the top floor, with windows overlooking the city. Amelia Torres was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd been with Morrison Tech for over a decade. She gestured for me to sit across from her polished conference table. "I've been reviewing the terminations you authorized," she said, spreading out files. "Everything appears to be in order, but I want to understand the timeline better." She pulled out a calendar and began marking dates. "The promotion decision was made here. The audit happened here. The terminations here. That's a very compressed timeline. Corporate moved quickly once they saw the numbers," I said. "Yes, but I'm wondering why the audit was ordered in the first place. Performance issues don't typically trigger immediate corporate intervention unless there's something else going on." I shifted in my chair. "What do you mean?" "I made some calls this morning. The audit wasn't random. Someone specifically requested it. Someone with influence." "Who?" Amelia hesitated. "Harrison Caldwell." The pieces started clicking into place. He was involved in my promotion review. More than involved. He was the deciding vote. And according to his expense reports, he was having regular contact with Miranda in the months before your review. You think they were having an affair? I think that's a possibility we need to consider. If personal relationships influenced professional decisions, that creates significant liability for the company. I thought about Bradley's implications, about political considerations and relationships with key stakeholders. What does this mean for my position? Nothing changes regarding the terminations. Your former colleague still violated company policy, but if there was corruption in the promotion process, that's a separate issue. An issue that could affect me how? Amelia's expression was carefully neutral. If the original promotion decision was tainted, corporate might decide to reevaluate the entire situation. My heart sank. After everything I'd been through, they might take away the job I'd fought so hard to earn. However, Amelia continued, any reevaluation would have to consider your actual performance and qualifications. Based on the audit results, you're clearly the right person for the role. But it creates doubt. It creates questions, which is probably exactly what your ex-husband intended when he took this case. I stared out the window at the parking lot. Bradley's car was gone, but I could still feel his presence like a shadow. What do you recommend? We conduct our own internal investigation. Full transparency. If there was misconduct, we address it head-on rather than letting it become leverage in a wrongful termination suit. And if we find something, then we deal with the consequences. But we do it on our terms, not theirs. I nodded, though my stomach was churning. Bradley had found a way to turn my victory into a potential disaster, just like always. There's one more thing, Amelia said. I looked into your ex-husband's firm. Kellerman & Associates specializes in employment law, but they're also known for taking high-profile cases that generate publicity. This isn't just about your former colleagues. This is about building a reputation, at my expense. Potentially, but that also means he might be overreaching. Lawyers who chase headlines sometimes get careless with facts. When I returned to my office, I found a manila envelope on my desk. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Miranda and Harrison Caldwell in what appeared to be a hotel room, embracing. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days before my promotion review. My hands trembled as I stared at the image. Someone had been watching. Someone had documented their affair. And now someone was making sure I knew about it. My phone rang. Bradley again. Did you receive my package? He asked. I don't know what you're talking about. The photograph. Interesting, isn't it? The timestamp is particularly revealing. Where did you get this? Does it matter? What matters is what it represents. A pattern of decision-making based on personal relationships rather than merit. I closed my eyes. What do you want, Bradley? A conversation, face-to-face, 1 hour, you choose the location. So you can ambush me with more photographs, more implications, so I can tell you the truth about what happened. Because believe it or not, Josephine, we might be on the same side here. That was the last thing I expected him to say. Explain. Not over the phone. Meet me at the Blue Door. You know where we had our first date? Neutral ground, public place. Bring your lawyer if it makes you feel better. The Blue Door. A coffee shop downtown where we'd spent hours talking about our dreams, back when I thought Bradley cared about mine as much as his own. Why should I trust you? Because despite everything that happened between us, I know you want the truth, and I know you're smart enough to recognize it when you hear it. Against my better judgment, I found myself considering it. Bradley was manipulative, controlling, and vindictive, but he was also brilliant, and he didn't make moves without calculating all the angles. 1 hour, I said, and I'm bringing Amelia. Fair enough, I'll see you at 3. After he hung up, I sat staring at the photograph. Miranda and Caldwell looked happy, intimate, completely oblivious to being watched. Who had taken this picture? And why give it to me now? I called Amelia and explained the situation. She agreed to accompany me to the meeting, though she warned me to be cautious. Your ex-husband is fishing, she said. He's trying to create doubt about the legitimacy of your position so he can argue that your actions as manager were invalid. But what if he's right? What if the promotion decision was corrupt? Then we deal with it honestly. But we don't let him manipulate us into making decisions based on speculation and innuendo. The Blue Door hadn't changed much in the 5 years since Bradley and I had divorced. Same mismatched furniture, same eclectic art on the walls, same smell of coffee and pastries. But sitting across from him now, watching him sip his espresso with the same precise movements I remembered, felt surreal. Amelia sat beside me, legal pad ready, every inch the professional attorney. Bradley had come alone, which surprised me. Thank you for coming, he said. I know this is awkward. Cut the pleasantries, Bradley. You said you had information. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. What I'm about to tell you is confidential client information, but given the circumstances, I believe disclosure is warranted. He slid a document across the table. It was a termination agreement dated 6 months ago. Harrison Caldwell was fired from Morrison Tech for having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. The company paid him a substantial severance to avoid a scandal. I stared at the document. This can't be right. Caldwell is still VP of Business Development. No, he's not. He hasn't been employed by Morrison Tech for 6 months, but someone has been using his credentials and access codes to conduct business. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying that someone has been impersonating Harrison Caldwell, someone with intimate knowledge of the company's operations and access to internal systems. Amelia leaned forward. That's a serious allegation. Do you have proof? Bradley pulled out another document. Digital forensic analysis of email traffic from Caldwell's account. The patterns are all wrong. Different typing speeds, different vocabulary patterns, different IP addresses. Who's been using his account? We're still investigating, but we have suspicions. He pulled out the photograph I'd received earlier, along with several others. They showed Miranda and the man I thought was Caldwell in various locations. Restaurants, hotels, the office after hours. Look closely at the metadata, Bradley said, pointing to timestamps and location data. These photos were taken over a period of several months, but here's the interesting part. Some of them were taken after Caldwell's official termination date. I studied the images more carefully. The man's face was always partially obscured or turned away from the camera. You think this isn't Caldwell? I think someone wanted you to believe it was Caldwell. Someone who benefited from having you think the promotion process was corrupt. My mind raced through the implications. Why would someone do that? To discredit your position, to create grounds for challenging the terminations, to manipulate you into making decisions that would benefit them. Benefit who? Bradley hesitated. That's where things get complicated. He pulled out a financial document. Veronica, Dennis, and Priya didn't contact me. I was contacted by someone else. Someone who offered to pay my fees to represent them. Who? Initially, I thought it was Caldwell. The communications came from his email account. But given what we've discovered about that account being compromised, you don't know who your real client is. No, and that's a violation of legal ethics that could cost me my license. I sat back, trying to process everything. So, you're here to warn me? I'm here because I realized I was being used. Someone is playing a very sophisticated game, and we're all pawns in it. Amelia had been taking notes throughout the conversation. Mr. Kellerman, are you withdrawing as counsel for the terminated employees? I'm filing a motion to withdraw, citing conflict of interest and client identity issues. The case will be dismissed unless they find new representation. That seems convenient, I said. Bradley met my eyes. Josephine, I know I've given you every reason not to trust me. Our marriage, the divorce, I handled all of it badly. I let my ego and my need to control everything destroy something that should have been precious to me. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever Bradley showed flashes of the man I'd fallen in love with. Why are you really here, Bradley? Because I think you're in danger. Someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to manipulate this situation. They've committed identity theft, fraud, and possibly worse. And they're not done. What do you mean? He pulled out his phone and showed me a message. I received this morning. The text read, "The situation with Morrison Tech needs to be resolved quickly. Payment depends on results. Don't disappoint us." Us? Amelia asked. That's what concerns me. This isn't one person with a grudge. This is organized. A chill ran down my spine. Why would someone go to these lengths over a departmental management position? Maybe it's not about the position itself. Maybe it's about what you might discover in that position. I thought about my access to company systems, financial records, client information. As department manager, I could see everything. Budget allocations, project costs, vendor payments. You think there's something hidden in the company finances? I think someone is very worried about what you might find now that you have access to examine things closely. Amelia closed her legal pad. Mr. Kellerman, if you believe a crime has been committed, you should contact the authorities. With what evidence? Suspicious email patterns and anonymous payments. The FBI won't open an investigation based on that. But they might if they had a credible witness willing to cooperate, I said slowly. Bradley nodded. That's what I was hoping you'd say. We spent the next hour developing a plan. Bradley would formally withdraw from representing my former colleagues and turn over all communications with his mysterious client to the FBI. Amelia would conduct a comprehensive audit of Morrison Tech's financial systems, looking for irregularities. And I would document everything I could access from my new position. It felt strange working with Bradley again. Despite everything that had happened between us, we'd always been effective partners when we focused on a common goal. That compatibility was part of what had made our marriage work for as long as it did. There's one more thing, Bradley said as we prepared to leave. The person behind this, they know you well. They anticipated your reactions, your moves. They used your own competence and work ethic against you. Meaning it's probably someone close to you, someone who's been watching you for a long time. The thought made my skin crawl. Any suspects? That's what we need to figure out. As we left the blue door, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate threat of the wrongful termination suit was gone, but it had been replaced by something much more sinister. Someone had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to manipulate me into a position where I could be controlled or discredited. They'd used my former colleagues, created fake evidence, and possibly committed multiple felonies. But why? Back at the office, I began reviewing financial records with new eyes. Morrison Tech was a mid-sized company with annual revenues of about $50 million. We had contracts with several government agencies and Fortune 500 companies. Nothing that should attract organized criminal interest, unless someone was stealing from those contracts. I pulled up vendor payment records for the past year. Most were routine: office supplies, software licenses, consulting fees. But there were several payments to companies I didn't recognize, large payments. Apex Solutions, $127,000 for technical consulting. Strategic Systems, Inc., $89,000 for project management. Digital Dynamics, LLC, $156,000 for software development. I searched our project database for references to these vendors. Nothing. No contracts, no deliverables, no project records. Ghost vendors. Companies that existed only on paper, receiving payments for services never rendered. My hands shook as I calculated the total. Over $800,000 in the past year alone. Enough to fund salaries for several employees or justify keeping someone like me from looking too closely at the books. I printed everything and called Amelia. I found something, I said. We need to talk. An hour later, Amelia was in my office reviewing the financial records. Her expression grew more grave with each document. This is embezzlement, she said finally. Large-scale systematic theft. How long has it been going on? These payments go back 3 years. Probably longer, but I'd need access to archived records to be sure. Who authorized these payments? Amelia checked the approval codes. They're all authorized by Miranda, but they required a secondary approval from the department head, which would have been Miranda too, since she was both the boss and the acting department head after the previous manager left. Exactly. She had the perfect setup to steal money and cover her tracks. I leaned back in my chair. So someone killed Miranda to cover up the embezzlement, then tried to manipulate me into the position so they could control me, or discredit you if you discovered the theft. But Miranda wasn't killed. She was just fired. Amelia looked uncomfortable. About that. I made some calls after our conversation with your ex-husband. Miranda wasn't just fired. She was arrested. Arrested? For what? Driving under the influence. She crashed into a family of 4 on her way home from the termination meeting. 2 of them are in critical condition. The room seemed to spin. Was it really an accident? The police think so. Her blood alcohol was 3 times the legal limit. But the timing is suspicious. Someone got her drunk and pointed her toward that intersection. That's a very serious accusation, Josephine. It's a very serious situation. I thought about Miranda's state of mind when she left the building. Devastated, humiliated, but not visibly intoxicated. She'd been upset, but coherent. Where did she go between leaving here and the accident? I don't know, but I can find out. While Amelia made calls, I continued reviewing financial records. The ghost vendor payments were just the beginning. There were also inflated consulting fees, duplicate invoices, and contracts with companies that seemed to exist only in cyberspace. Someone had been using Morrison Tech as their personal bank account for years. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Stop digging. Some secrets are better left buried. I showed the message to Amelia when she returned. We're calling the FBI, she said. This has gone beyond corporate misconduct. Wait, let me try something first. I opened my laptop and began typing a response to the anonymous number. I know about the ghost vendors. I know about the embezzlement. If you want to make a deal, we should talk. The response came within minutes. Parking garage, level B2, 1 hour, come alone. Amelia shook her head. Absolutely not. We're not playing games with criminals. What if this is our chance to get answers? To understand who's behind all this? What if it's a trap? What if they plan to eliminate the one person who can expose them? I stared at the message. Meeting an anonymous criminal in an underground parking garage was obviously dangerous. But walking away meant letting them disappear and leaving too many questions unanswered. I'll wear a wire, I said. You can monitor from nearby. If anything goes wrong, you call for backup. This is insane. This whole situation is insane, but I'm tired of being a pawn in someone else's game. An hour later, I stood in the parking garage wearing a recording device that Amelia had borrowed from a private investigator friend. My phone was set to dial 911 with the touch of a button. The garage was mostly empty, just a few cars scattered across the dimly lit space. I waited near the elevator, trying to control my breathing. Footsteps echoed from behind a concrete pillar. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Priya. Hello, Josephine, she said, her voice eerily calm. Priya? You're behind all this? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm behind some of it, but not all. The embezzlement. That was Miranda's idea. She needed money for her gambling debts. I just helped her cover her tracks. By setting up ghost vendors? By creating digital paper trails that would pass casual inspection. Miranda was smart, but she wasn't technically sophisticated. I tried to process this information. Quiet, gossipy Priya was actually a criminal mastermind. Why involve me? Why the elaborate scheme with my promotion? Because Miranda got greedy. She started taking larger amounts, getting careless. We needed her gone and someone controllable in her place. Someone controllable? Veronica would have been perfect. Incompetent, insecure, easy to manipulate. She would have signed whatever we put in front of her. But I got the job instead, thanks to your ex-husband's investigation into Harrison Caldwell. That wasn't part of our plan. My mind raced. Bradley's investigation into Caldwell was legitimate? Completely. Caldwell was having an affair with Miranda, just like the evidence suggested. But we didn't fake that evidence. We just made sure it came to light at the right time. To discredit the promotion process. To create doubt about your authority. If your promotion was tainted, any decisions you made could be challenged, including the decision to fire you. Exactly. We were planning to sue the company, get reinstated with back pay, and return to our profitable little arrangement. But Bradley figured out you were manipulating him. Priya's expression darkened. Your ex-husband is more clever than we anticipated. When he started asking questions about client identity and payment sources, we had to accelerate our timeline. What timeline? The timeline for eliminating loose ends. A chill ran down my spine. What happened to Miranda? Miranda got drunk and crashed her car. Tragic accident. You got her drunk. I bought her drinks. She chose to consume them. She chose to drive. The casual way Priya discussed what amounted to attempted murder made my blood run cold. You've been stealing from the company for 3 years. How much? About $2 million, total. Not bad for a small operation. Small operation? This involves multiple people. Me, Miranda, and one outside partner. Though Miranda was becoming a liability. Who's the outside partner? Priya smiled. Someone with access to create fake companies, falsify vendor credentials, and launder money through legitimate business channels. Someone in finance? Someone in finance at our parent company. Morrison Tech is just one subsidiary. The same scheme has been running in 6 different locations. I thought about Morrison Tech's parent corporation, Meridian Holdings. A vast network of subsidiaries and shell companies that would be perfect for hiding financial fraud. How much total? Across all subsidiaries? About $15 million over 4 years. The scope was staggering. This wasn't simple embezzlement. It was organized corporate fraud on a massive scale. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to help us finish the job. What job? One final transfer. $5 million from Morrison Tech's Capital Development Fund to a series of offshore accounts. Then we disappear. I'll never help you steal more money. Yes, you will. Because if you don't, more people are going to have accidents. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was Bradley, sitting in his car outside his office building. He looks peaceful, doesn't he? Be a shame if something happened to him on his drive home. My heart pounded. You're threatening Bradley? I'm explaining the consequences of non-cooperation. Your ex-husband has been very helpful, but his usefulness has reached its end. What do you want me to do? Transfer the money. I'll provide the routing information. You have access to the Capital Development Fund as department manager. That would require board approval for an amount that large. Not if it's structured as multiple smaller transfers over several days. Emergency consulting fees, urgent equipment purchases, critical software licenses. You're creative. You'll figure it out. I stared at her, trying to reconcile this cold criminal with the gossipy coworker I thought I knew. How long have you been planning this? Years. Since I started working here. Did you really think I took this job because I loved filing reports and managing schedules? I have a computer science degree from MIT and an MBA from Wharton. I was recruited specifically for this operation. Recruited by who? Someone who saw an opportunity to exploit Morrison Tech's financial systems and needed inside help to execute it. Your outside partner. My employer. Morrison Tech was never my real job. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Priya had been a plant from the beginning, inserted into the company specifically to steal money. What about Veronica and Dennis? Are they involved? Useful idiots. Veronica was supposed to get the promotion, which would have made our final phase much simpler. Dennis was just camouflage, someone to make our little group look like ordinary office workers instead of a theft operation. But they were genuinely trying to sabotage my promotion. Of course, I encouraged their resentment and gave them just enough information to make their campaign effective. People are remarkably easy to manipulate when you understand their insecurities. I thought about all the times Priya had been there during my colleagues' complaints about me, nodding sympathetically, offering suggestions, fanning the flames of their jealousy. You orchestrated everything. I orchestrated what I could control. Some things, like your ex-husband's involvement, were unexpected complications that required adaptation, but you adapted. That's what good thieves do. We adjust to changing circumstances. My phone vibrated with a text message. Priya glanced at it and frowned. Problem? I asked. Time to go. You have 48 hours to make the transfers. If the money isn't moved by Friday, your ex-husband will have a very unfortunate accident. Wait, I need more information. Account numbers? Transfer protocols? You'll receive instructions tomorrow. For now, just remember what's at stake. She started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Josephine? If you're thinking about recording this conversation or involving the police, remember that we have surveillance on several people you care about. Your ex-husband, your sister, your elderly neighbor who walks her dog every morning at 7. Accidents can happen to anyone. With that, she disappeared into the shadows between the parked cars. I stood frozen for several minutes, processing what I'd learned. Priya was a professional criminal who'd infiltrated Morrison Tech years ago. She and her unknown partner had stolen millions from multiple companies. Miranda had been their inside accomplice until she became a liability, and now they wanted me to help them steal $5 million more, or they'd kill Bradley. I walked back to my car on shaking legs. The recording device felt heavy against my chest. Every footstep echoed in the empty garage. Amelia was waiting in the security office, monitoring my location through GPS. When I walked in, she immediately saw my expression. What happened? I told her everything, playing back the recording. Her face grew pale as she listened to Priya's casual discussion of embezzlement and murder. We're calling the FBI now, she said. This is way beyond corporate crime. She threatened Bradley and my sister. If you don't involve the police, you become an accessory to theft and potentially murder. These people have already shown they're willing to kill to protect their operation. But if I transfer the money, they'll kill you anyway. You know too much about their operation to be allowed to live. The cold logic was undeniable. Priya and her partner had eliminated Miranda when she became inconvenient. They'd do the same to me once I'd served their purpose. What do? We set a trap. We pretend to cooperate while building a case that will put them away permanently. Amelia called a contact at the FBI while I sat in her office, trying to process everything I'd learned. The Morrison Tech I thought I knew was actually a front for organized crime. My colleagues weren't just petty office politicians. One was a professional thief and the others were unwitting pawns. And somehow, my divorce from Bradley had accidentally exposed part of their operation. Agent Rebecca Torres arrived within an hour. She was a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd seen plenty of corporate crime in her career. Ms. Chen, we've been tracking financial irregularities in Meridian Holdings subsidiaries for several months. Your recording confirms some of our suspicions. You've been investigating Morrison Tech? We've been investigating a network of shell companies that seem to exist solely to receive payments from legitimate businesses. Morrison Tech is one of several companies making suspicious payments to these entities. She showed me a chart mapping connections between various companies and offshore accounts. Morrison Tech was just one node in a vast web of financial fraud. How much money total? Conservative estimate? About $50 million over 5 years. Possibly more. We're still tracing all the connections. The scope was breathtaking. I'd stumbled into the middle of a massive criminal enterprise. What do you need from me? Cooperation with the money transfer. We want to trace where the funds go, identify all the participants, and gather evidence for prosecution. You want me to actually steal the money? We want you to appear to steal the money while we monitor every step of the process. The transfers will be reversed before the funds leave federal jurisdiction. What about the threats against Bradley and my sister? We'll provide protection, but the best way to ensure their safety is to capture the people threatening them. Agent Torres outlined a plan that made me nervous but seemed logical. I would go through with the transfers while wearing a wire and using monitored systems. The FBI would track the money trail and arrest everyone involved simultaneously. What if something goes wrong? We'll have agents positioned throughout the building and monitoring all communications. If there's any sign of danger, we'll intervene immediately. And if Priya realizes it's a trap, that's a risk. But these criminals have been operating for years without detection. They're confident, maybe overconfident. They expect you to cooperate out of fear. I thought about Bradley, probably sitting in his office right now, unaware that his life was in danger. About my sister, living her normal life 3 states away. About the elderly woman next door who walked her ancient beagle every morning and always waved when she saw me. Okay, I said, let's do it. The next morning, I arrived at work wearing a wire and carrying a briefcase full of FBI monitoring equipment disguised as routine business materials. Agent Torres and her team were positioned in a surveillance van outside the building. At 9:47 a.m., my computer received an encrypted email with transfer instructions. 16 separate transactions, each under the threshold that would trigger automatic review. The money would be moved to holding accounts at 6 different banks before being consolidated and transferred offshore. It was sophisticated, systematic, and almost certainly untraceable without law enforcement cooperation. I began the first transfer, documenting each step for the FBI recording. As department manager, I had access to make emergency expenditures up to $500,000 without board approval, exactly the limit Priya had specified for each transaction. The first transfer went through smoothly. I categorized it as emergency consulting fees for a critical software patch. The second was equipment replacement due to unexpected hardware failure. By lunch, I'd moved $2.5 million into accounts I'd never heard of. My phone buzzed with a text from Priya. Good progress. Continue this afternoon. I texted back. This is making me nervous. Are you sure we won't get caught? Trust the process. Everything is under control. But something felt wrong. The transfers were going too smoothly, and Priya seemed too relaxed for someone orchestrating a major theft. During lunch, I called Agent Torres. Something's bothering me, I said. This feels too easy. How so? Priya is a computer expert who's been planning this for years. She knows these systems better than anyone. Why would she need me to make the transfers when she could probably do it herself? There was a pause. That's a good question. What if this isn't about stealing the money? What if it's about making it look like I stole the money? Explain. Think about it. If the FBI is investigating financial irregularities in Meridian Holdings subsidiaries, and suddenly $5 million goes missing from Morrison Tech right after I become department manager, who looks guilty? You do. Exactly. Priya and her partner disappear with the money they've already stolen, and I take the blame for this final theft. It's the perfect exit strategy. Agent Torres was quiet for several seconds. We need to reconsider our approach. What do you mean? I mean we might be walking into a trap designed to frame you for everything. My blood ran cold. So what do? We spring our own trap, continue with the transfers, but we're going to modify the plan. An hour later, I was back at my desk, continuing the money transfers while the FBI adjusted their surveillance strategy. Instead of waiting to trace where the money went, they were going to intercept it at the holding accounts and arrest anyone who tried to access it. As I initiated the 13th transfer, my office door opened. Priya walked in, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the same innocent smile I'd seen her use with customers. "How's your day going?" she asked casually. "Fine, just catching up on some administrative tasks." She glanced at my computer screen. "Looks complicated. Year-end budget adjustments, nothing exciting. Mind if I sit? I wanted to talk about my unemployment claim." The audacity was remarkable. She was sitting in my office, watching me steal money at her direction, while casually discussing her unemployment benefits. "What about it? I'm hoping you won't contest it. Despite our differences, I think we can both agree that the termination was sudden. I'll consider it." She leaned forward slightly. "I appreciate that. You know, despite everything that happened, I always respected your work ethic. You're very thorough." There was something in her tone that made me look up from my computer. She was staring directly at me, her expression suddenly cold. "Very thorough," she repeated. "The kind of person who documents everything, who keeps detailed records, who might even record conversations." My heart stopped. She knew about the wire. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't." She stood up, still smiling. "Well, I should let you get back to your administrative tasks. Don't work too late. You never know what might happen to people who stay in the office after hours." After she left, I sat frozen for several minutes. She knew. Somehow, she'd figured out that I was working with law enforcement. I touched my earpiece, a nearly invisible device that allowed me to communicate with the FBI surveillance team. "She knows," I whispered. Agent Torres' voice was calm but urgent. "Are you in immediate danger?" "I don't think so, but she knows about the recording." "Continue with the transfers. We're adjusting our timeline." I completed the remaining transactions in a daze. With each transfer, I felt more like I was signing my own arrest warrant. If this was a setup, I was providing all the evidence needed to convict myself of embezzlement. At 4:17 p.m., I sent the final transfer. $5 million had been moved from Morrison Tech's accounts to a maze of holding companies and offshore banks. My computer immediately received a message. "Phase 1 complete. Report to parking garage level B2 for final instructions." I gathered my things, turned off my computer, and headed for the elevator. The office felt different now. Every colleague looked like a potential threat. Every security camera seemed to be watching me specifically. In the elevator, I whispered to my FBI contact, "Heading to the parking garage. She wants to meet again. We're in position. Remember, if you feel unsafe, use the code word." The parking garage was darker than yesterday, with several burned-out lights creating pockets of shadow. I found Priya waiting by the same concrete pillar, but this time she wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit stood beside her. He was tall, thin, with silver hair and the kind of practiced smile I associated with corporate executives. "Josephine," Priya said, "I'd like you to meet my partner." The man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Richard Kellerman. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." My knees nearly buckled. Kellerman. Bradley's last name. "You're related to Bradley?" "His uncle. I'm also a partner at Kellerman & Associates, though I specialize in corporate finance rather than employment law." The family connection explained how he'd known to manipulate Bradley's investigation. He'd been feeding his nephew information while using him to gather intelligence on me. "You're the one behind all this." I prefer to think of myself as an opportunist. When I learned that my nephew's ex-wife worked for a Morrison Tech subsidiary, I saw potential for a mutually beneficial arrangement. Beneficial for who? For me, primarily. Morrison Tech has been funding my retirement through irregular consulting fees for several years, but all good things must come to an end. He gestured toward my briefcase. "I assume you've completed the transfers?" "The money's been moved." "Excellent. Now for the final phase." He pulled out a tablet and showed me a document. "This is your confession. It details how you embezzled $5 million using your access as department manager. Very thorough, very convincing." "I'm not signing that." "Of course you are, because the alternative is much worse." He nodded to Priya, who pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It was security footage from Bradley's office building, showing him walking to his car. "He has a routine," Richard said. "Leaves his office at 6:15 every evening, stops at the same coffee shop, takes the same route home. Very predictable." "What do you want?" "I want you to sign the confession. You'll also transfer an additional $2 million from the company's emergency fund. Consider it a bonus for your cooperation. I don't have access to the emergency fund, but you know someone who does. Your new friend Amelia Torres has the authorization codes." My blood chilled. They knew about my collaboration with the general counsel. "How do you know about your conversations with Morrison Tech's legal department?" "Please. We've been monitoring company communications for months. Did you think we'd miss your meeting yesterday?" He was right. If they'd been intercepting corporate communications, they would know about my conversations with Amelia, my cooperation with the FBI, everything. "You know I'm working with law enforcement." "We know you think you're working with law enforcement," Priya said. "But Agent Rebecca Torres isn't FBI." The world tilted. "What?" "She's an actress we hired. Very convincing, though. The fake badge, the surveillance van, the whole elaborate setup. I particularly enjoyed the part about protecting your ex-husband while we were already monitoring his every move. I felt like I was falling through empty space. The FBI investigation was fake. The protection was fake. The plan to catch the criminals was fake. The recording equipment? Functional, but it's recording to our servers, not federal ones. We needed to know exactly what you were thinking, how much you discovered, who you might have contacted. But the wire is transmitting to that van outside? Yes. staffed by our people. Richard smiled. We've been listening to your conversations with Agent Torres all day. Very illuminating. Every detail of my cooperation had been monitored by the people I was trying to catch. They knew everything I knew, everyone I'd contacted, every move I'd planned to make. Why the elaborate deception? Why not just take the money and disappear? Because we needed someone to take the blame, Priya said. And we needed that someone to be completely convincing. A confused victim who genuinely believed she was helping law enforcement would be much more credible than a knowing accomplice. You've been planning to frame me from the beginning, from the moment we learned about your connection to Bradley, Richard confirmed. His investigation into Harrison Caldwell was legitimate, by the way. We just made sure he discovered exactly what we wanted him to discover, when we wanted him to discover it. And Miranda was becoming unreliable. Too much gambling, too much drinking, too much attention. We nudged her toward that final accident, but she made the choice to drink and drive. The casual admission of murder made my stomach turn. These people had killed Miranda as coldly as they'd manipulated everyone else. What happens now? Now you sign the confession and make one more transfer. Then you disappear, voluntarily or otherwise. And if I refuse? Richard nodded to Priya, who held up her phone again. This time, the screen showed a live video feed of my sister's apartment building. Jessica has such a lovely view from her balcony, he said. 12 floors up. Very dangerous if someone were to accidentally fall. The threat was clear. Cooperate or watch my sister die. I stared at the confession document. It was thorough, detailing a pattern of embezzlement that stretched back months. It explained my motive, financial pressure from my divorce. It described my method, using management access to create fake vendors and authorize fraudulent payments. It even included forged evidence of offshore accounts in my name. How long have you been planning this? Since we learned about Bradley's investigation into Morrison Tech, we realized that his ex-wife working here was too perfect an opportunity to waste. You manipulated our entire divorce? We influenced certain aspects. Your ex-husband's financial aggression, for instance. We made sure he left you in a precarious position that would make embezzlement seem plausible. The scope of their manipulation was staggering. They'd been controlling my life for months, maybe years, setting up the perfect circumstances to frame me for their crimes. Sign the document, Richard said. Then call Amelia Torres and ask her to meet you here. Tell her you need emergency authorization for additional transfers. She won't come alone. She will if you sound desperate enough. If you convince her that you're in danger and need immediate help. I looked at the confession again. Signing it would make me legally responsible for millions in theft, but refusing would cost my sister's life. I need a pen, I said. Richard smiled and handed me an expensive fountain pen. I thought you might. I signed the document with shaking hands. Each letter felt like a nail in my own coffin. Excellent. Now call Amelia. I pulled out my phone and dialed the general counsel's number. When she answered, I tried to make my voice sound panicked. Amelia? It's Josephine. I need your help. Can you meet me in the parking garage? Level B2? Josephine, what's wrong? You sound upset. I can't explain over the phone. Just please come and bring your authorization codes for the emergency fund. Why would you need... Please. I think I'm in serious trouble. There was a pause. I'll be right there. I hung up and looked at Richard. She's coming. Good. When she arrives, you'll tell her that you've been embezzling money and need her help to transfer additional funds to cover your tracks. You'll explain that if she doesn't help, you'll implicate her in the scheme. She'll never believe that. She will if you're convincing, and you will be convincing because your sister's life depends on it. We waited in the shadows between parked cars. Richard checked his watch periodically while Priya monitored something on her phone, probably the live feed from my sister's apartment. 10 minutes later, Amelia's car pulled into the parking garage. She parked near the elevator and looked around nervously before walking toward our section. Josephine? She called. Where are you? I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. I'm here. Amelia hurried toward me, her expression full of concern. What's going on? Why are we meeting here? Because she has something to tell you, Richard said, emerging from the shadows with Priya beside him. Amelia stopped short. Who are these people? They're the ones I've been working with, I said, hating every word. The ones who helped me steal the money. What money? Josephine, what are you talking about? I've been embezzling from Morrison Tech, $5 million so far, and I need your help to transfer more. Amelia stared at me in shock. That's impossible. You would never... I was desperate, I continued, following the script Richard had outlined. The divorce left me in debt. I saw an opportunity and I took it. This is insane. You're one of the most honest people I know. People change when they're desperate enough. Amelia looked between me and the two strangers. Even if what you're saying is true, I can't help you steal more money. You can and you will, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her a photo of her teenage daughter. Because if you don't, Lauren might have an accident on her way home from school tomorrow. The photo had been on Priya's phone. They'd been watching Amelia's family too. Amelia's face went white. You're threatening my daughter? I'm explaining the situation. Transfer the money and everyone stays safe. Refuse and people get hurt. Richard stepped forward. Ms. Torres, you're a reasonable woman. Your colleague here has gotten herself into serious trouble, and now she needs your help to resolve it quietly. By stealing more money? By completing a transaction that's already in progress. The money will be replaced before anyone notices it's gone. It was a lie, of course. There was no plan to replace anything, but Amelia didn't know that. How much? She asked quietly. $2 million. Emergency transfer to cover immediate operating expenses. That will require board approval. Not if it's categorized as critical infrastructure maintenance. You have emergency authorization for that. Amelia stood silently for a long moment, weighing her options. I could see her calculating the risks, trying to find a way out that wouldn't endanger her daughter. If I do this, she said finally, how do I know you'll leave my family alone? Because we'll disappear after tonight, Richard said. This is the last transaction. After this, you'll never see us again. Another lie. They couldn't afford to leave witnesses who knew their identities. I need my laptop, Amelia said. The transfer has to be done through the secure system at my office. No, Priya said immediately. Too many security cameras, too much digital tracking. You'll do it from my laptop using remote access. She pulled out a computer and opened it on the hood of a nearby car. Log into the corporate system. Amelia hesitated. This isn't right. Even if Josephine is in trouble, stealing more money isn't the solution. The solution is keeping everyone alive, I said. Just do the transfer. As Amelia typed in her login credentials, I felt sick. I was forcing a good person to commit a crime to save lives that were probably already forfeit. Richard and Priya had no intention of letting any of us survive this. The system is asking for secondary authorization, Amelia said. Use emergency protocols, Richard instructed. Natural disaster recovery procedures. But there's no natural disaster. There will be if you don't cooperate. Amelia's hands shook as she navigated through the system. She was accessing accounts with millions of dollars, protected by layers of security and oversight. Under normal circumstances, moving this much money would require approval from multiple board members and extensive documentation. I can't do this, she said suddenly, stepping back from the laptop. I won't steal money, and I won't be part of threatening innocent people. Richard sighed. Priya? Priya held up her phone, showing the live video of my sister's apartment. Jessica just got home from work. She's making dinner. Looks like pasta. On the screen, I could see my sister moving around her kitchen, completely unaware that criminals were watching her every move. Please, I said to Amelia. I know this is wrong, but they'll kill her if we don't cooperate. And they'll kill us if we do cooperate, Amelia replied. Can't you see that? They can't let us live knowing what we know. She was right, of course. But what choice did we have? Complete the transfer, Richard said, his voice losing its corporate politeness. Now. No, Amelia said firmly. I won't help you steal money, and I won't be intimidated by threats. Richard nodded to Priya, who made a phone call. It's time, she said into the phone. Proceed with the apartment. Wait, I screamed. Don't hurt her. Then convince your friend to cooperate. I grabbed Amelia's arm. Please, they'll kill my sister. Josephine, listen to me. These people are going to kill all of us regardless. Your sister, my daughter, everyone who knows about this. The only way to stop them is to refuse to give them what they want. But if there's a chance, there's no chance. Look at them. Really look at them. I turned to study Richard and Priya. Richard was checking his watch with the impatience of someone who had a schedule to keep. Priya was reviewing something on her phone with the detachment of someone reading a grocery list. They were professionals, cold, efficient, and completely without empathy. Amelia was right. They'd never intended to let us live. You're right, I said quietly. We're already dead. Not necessarily, Amelia replied. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well make it difficult for them. She grabbed the laptop and smashed it against the concrete floor. The screen shattered, sparks flew, and the hard drive made a grinding noise as it died. That was stupid, Richard said. Now your sister dies for nothing. Maybe, Amelia said. But you don't get the money either. Priya was already on her phone. The targets are not cooperating. Proceed with all contingencies. My heart broke thinking about my sister, but I felt a strange sense of relief. At least we wouldn't be complicit in our own destruction. You have no idea what you've done, Richard said. We have backup plans for situations like this. I'm sure you do, Amelia replied. But you don't have the money. We have $5 million already. That's enough for now. Actually, you don't, a new voice said from behind us. We turned to see Agent Rebecca Torres walking toward us, flanked by 4 other people in FBI jackets. Unlike yesterday, she looked completely professional and carried herself with unmistakable authority. Agent Torres, FBI, she said, showing her badge to Richard and Priya. You're both under arrest. I stared at her in confusion. But Priya said you were fake, that the whole investigation was fake. Ms. Patel was misinformed, Torres replied. Though I'm impressed by the elaborate deception they constructed to convince you otherwise. The actress was one of our undercover agents. We've been tracking this criminal organization for 18 months. When you contacted us yesterday, it provided the perfect opportunity to gather evidence and protect potential victims. Priya tried to run, but was immediately tackled by one of the agents. Richard stood perfectly still, already calculating his legal options. The money transfers? I asked. Intercepted and reversed. The funds are being returned to Morrison Tech's accounts as we speak. My sister has been under protective surveillance since yesterday. She's safe. Amelia's daughter? Also safe. We've had teams watching everyone they threatened. As the agents handcuffed Richard and Priya, I felt my legs give out. Amelia caught me before I collapsed completely. It's over, she said. It's really over. But Agent Torres looked grim. Actually, it's just beginning. This operation involved at least 12 people across 6 companies. We've arrested the local cell, but the larger organization is still operational. Meaning you're both going to need protection until we can dismantle the entire network. These people don't give up easily. As they led Richard and Priya away, Richard looked back at me with cold fury. This isn't finished, he said. We have resources you can't imagine, people in places you'll never expect. Empty threats, Agent Torres said. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. But I noticed she didn't seem entirely convinced. 6 months later, I was living in a safe house in Colorado under federal protection. The trial had been a media sensation. Corporate embezzlement, family betrayal, and murder conspiracy. Richard Kellerman received life without parole. Priya got 25 years. Miranda survived her injuries but was sentenced to 15 years for her role in the embezzlement. Veronica and Dennis were cleared of any criminal wrongdoing, though they were fired from Morrison Tech for their role in undermining company operations. Veronica found work at a small accounting firm where her dramatic personality fit right in. Dennis started his own consulting business and, rumor had it, actually stopped drinking during work hours. Morrison Tech offered me a substantial settlement and a permanent position as chief security officer. The company had implemented new financial controls that made the kind of systematic theft I'd uncovered virtually impossible. Bradley visited me in Colorado. Our conversation was awkward but necessary. I'm sorry, he said, for everything. The divorce, the manipulation, using you as leverage against my own uncle. You couldn't have known he was a criminal. I should have known he was using me. Should have been more careful about sharing information about you. We sat on the porch of the safe house, watching mountains in the distance and trying to reconcile our shared past with our separate futures. Do you think we could have made it work? He asked. If circumstances had been different? Maybe. But circumstances weren't different. We became different people, and those people weren't compatible. No regrets? About the divorce? No. About the way it happened? Yes. For what it's worth, you handled this whole situation better than I would have. You were braver than I ever was. After he left, I called my sister. She'd moved to a new apartment and changed jobs, but she was gradually returning to normal life. When are you coming home? She asked. Soon. The FBI thinks they've identified most of the network. A few more arrests and I should be clear to resume normal life. What does normal life look like for you now? It was a good question. The woman who'd gone to work at Morrison Tech 6 months ago wouldn't recognize the person I'd become. I'd learned I was capable of things I'd never imagined, both good and bad. I don't know yet, but I'm looking forward to finding out. 3 weeks later, Agent Torres called with news. We got him, she said. The head of the operation. Turns out Richard Kellerman was middle management. The real boss was running similar schemes in 14 states. Who was it? Corporate executive named Harrison Caldwell. My blood ran cold. Caldwell? But he was the victim in Bradley's investigation. No, he was the mastermind. The whole affair with Miranda was a setup to create a cover story. He used his legitimate business relationships to identify vulnerable companies, then inserted operatives like Priya to steal from them systematically. So the Caldwell that Miranda was having an affair with was the real Caldwell? He cultivated that relationship specifically to gain access to Morrison Tech's financial systems through her. But the termination documents, forged. Caldwell was never fired. He was using his legitimate position to facilitate the thefts while creating paper trails that pointed to other people. It was brilliant and terrifying. Caldwell had used his actual corporate position to steal millions while making it look like the victims were other employees. Is it really over now? It's really over. You can go home. Home. I wasn't even sure where that was anymore. I returned to Morrison Tech as chief security officer, implementing systems designed to prevent the kind of elaborate fraud I'd uncovered. It was satisfying work, but I found myself looking over my shoulder for months. The trauma of being manipulated so completely had left lasting effects. I had trouble trusting new people and found myself analyzing every interaction for signs of deception. But gradually, I began to rebuild. I started dating someone, a teacher named Marcus, who had no connection to corporate America and thought my story sounded like something from a thriller novel. He was kind, straightforward, and completely incapable of the kind of manipulation I'd experienced. My sister and I grew closer, bonded by our shared experience of being targeted by criminals. She even moved to my city, taking a job at a nonprofit that helped victims of financial crimes. Bradley and I maintained a careful friendship. He'd left his uncle's firm and started his own practice, specializing in helping small businesses protect themselves from fraud. We had lunch occasionally and found we could be friends in a way we'd never managed as spouses. But the most unexpected development was my relationship with Amelia Torres. We'd been through something traumatic together, and it had created a bond that went beyond typical professional relationships. She left Morrison Tech to start her own legal practice, and I became her first client when I decided to write a book about my experiences. You should tell the story, she said. Not just for yourself, but for other people who might find themselves in similar situations. Who would want to read about corporate embezzlement and workplace manipulation? Anyone who's ever felt powerless in their job. Anyone who's been betrayed by people they trusted. Anyone who wonders if they're strong enough to fight back when everything goes wrong. The book took 2 years to write. It was harder than I expected to relive those months, to analyze the mistakes I'd made and the signs I'd missed. But it was also therapeutic. The book became a bestseller, partly because the story was so outrageous that people couldn't believe it was true. I appeared on talk shows and spoke at conferences about corporate fraud and workplace manipulation. But the most meaningful response came from readers who wrote to tell me their own stories. People who'd been bullied, manipulated, and betrayed in their workplaces. People who'd felt powerless against institutional corruption. Your story gave me the courage to report my supervisor for sexual harassment, one woman wrote. I'd been afraid no one would believe me, but you showed that sometimes the truth really does win. 5 years after the events at Morrison Tech, I was invited back to speak at the company's annual security conference. Walking into the building felt surreal, like visiting a place from a dream. The conference room was packed with employees I didn't recognize. Morrison Tech had grown significantly since the fraud case, partly because the publicity had actually enhanced the company's reputation for taking financial crimes seriously. Ladies and gentlemen, the CEO said, introducing me, I'd like you to meet the person who saved our company from becoming a cautionary tale about corporate crime. But as I looked out at the audience, I didn't see a room full of people I'd saved. I saw a room full of people who could find themselves in similar situations if they weren't careful. What happened here 5 years ago wasn't unique, I began. Corporate fraud happens everywhere, perpetrated by people who look and act like ordinary employees. The difference is whether organizations and individuals are prepared to recognize it and fight back. After my presentation, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous but determined. Ms. Chen? I think something similar might be happening at my company. Could we talk? And so the cycle began again. But this time, I was ready to help someone else fight back. Driving home from Morrison Tech that evening, I thought about how much my life had changed. I'd gone from being a victim of workplace manipulation to becoming someone who helped others recognize and resist it. The woman I'd been 5 years ago, desperate for promotion, willing to work endless hours for recognition, accepting mistreatment as the price of professional success, seemed like a stranger now. I'd learned that the most important skill in any workplace isn't technical expertise or political savvy. It's the ability to recognize when you're being manipulated and the courage to resist it. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How did the presentation go? Good, I replied. But I think I have a new project. Another book? Another fight? Because that's what I'd become. Someone who fights back. Someone who refuses to be a victim. Someone who helps other people refuse to be victims too. It wasn't the career path I'd planned, but it was the one I'd earned. And for the first time in my professional life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The parking lot at Morrison Tech was almost empty as I drove away. But unlike that terrifying evening 5 years ago when I'd watched my ex-husband walking toward my sabotaging coworkers, this time I felt powerful instead of powerless. I'd survived corporate manipulation, criminal conspiracy, and personal betrayal. I'd helped expose a multi-million-dollar fraud ring and put dangerous people in prison. But most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about becoming someone they could never control in the first place. As I drove into the sunset, heading home to the life I'd built from the ashes of the one that had been taken from me, I smiled. The game was over, and I had won.